Now we're ready. Hello, everyone. It's great to meet you all here to share about this so important and interesting topic. We have received hundreds of registrations from people in 24 different countries. You can see in the chat where people are connecting from today. Even if we thought of this event at the regional level for Latin America, many people from other continents have joined us as well, which makes us very happy because we can share with more people. This event is organized by three organizations: Stay True Organic, the publishing house that published the book Economy According to Rudolf Steiner in Spanish and Portuguese, the World Getanim Association that supported the cost of simultaneous translation today, and the Foundation Money and Awareness, who commented on the book and called on the organization of a study group. If you don't know these organizations, let me introduce them very briefly. Stay True Organic is an activist publishing house oriented to solutions of sustainable life, including biodynamic agriculture, healthy nurturing, local economies, natural construction, politics, and businesses that are socially responsible, offering inspiring alternatives for a change. The World Association Goetheanum, it's a network formed by companies, institutions, initiatives, and individuals based in Goetheanum in Switzerland. This global network is joined by anthroposophy and the will to work together for the future of mankind and the planet. The Foundation Dinero y Conciencia, or Money and Awareness, seeks to create a new economy based upon the human dignity from the aware use of money. Through workshops and lectures, it promotes change in people and companies. It also leads the creation of the Latin American ethical banking. Briefly, I will share three links, one from each organization, so that if you wish, you can learn more about them. And now, let's welcome Gary Lamb and Jean Mellet. I will first introduce them briefly, and then I will give the floor to them. We have the honor to have one of the authors of the book that we will be launching today, Mr. Gary Lamb, who will lecture about some crucial aspects of the contents of the book. Gary Lamb has been working for 36 years in the Antwer Valley Association in the north of the state of New York. He is currently the director of Center for Social Research, a social research center. This association includes a biodynamic farm with facilities to process dairy products, a bakery, a retail store, creation of agricultural appendixes, and a program of agriculture supported by the community, known as CCA in Spanish. Furthermore, the association has a Waldorf school, a program to train Waldorf teachers, a program of students who visit the farm, and a research center about ecology of the agricultural landscape. There, Gary has worked as the manager of the retail store, under director of the farm, and manager of the school. He gathers funds, he coordinates administrations, and he is professor of economy in the institute. His current work consists of completing the second volume of the book, A Path Towards the Sacred Creation, a compilation of different perspectives by Rudolf Steiner on technology. He also gives lectures and presentations about the social threefolding that Rudolf Steiner brought about and everything in the light of anthroposophy. Gary has published many books about threefold in social aspects, world of technology, and world of philosophy. His most recent publication is On the Wings of the World: Conversations and Human Relationships, Internal Aspects of the Quintessential Social Act and the Threefold Society. Gary is a member of the Anthroposophic Association and the Association of Social Sciences of the Higher School of Spiritual Sciences. We also have with us Jean Mellet, who has been one of the initiators of the meeting today. You probably know him, but I will introduce him briefly as well. Jean Mellet is the president of the Vivir Conciencia Foundation. He gives conferences and he's a consultant. He develops the process of development of the ethical Latin American bank. With over 40 years of experience in the sector of banking, he gave up his managerial position in 2015 to promote ethical banking in Latin America and to work in the dissemination of sustainability, anthroposophy, and education. This year, he will also give his first lecture in Mexico. Juan Botero, myself, at your service, will be moderating this event. I'm a former Waldorf student, a sociologist, and I work along with Joan for the Association Libre Conciencia, and I coordinate activities of World Getianum Association for Latin America. There you go. Before we start the presentation, I wanted to thank Martin Alonso of Stay True for the decision to publish this book, whose cover you can see on screen, and the translators who made possible its versions in Spanish and Portuguese, Maria Rosa Costa Alandi and Silvina Pinto Vasconcelos. Thank you so much for this meaningful contribution to those of us who are interested in Rudolf Steiner's work and who also implement it in our professions. I would like now to give the floor to Jean to greet him first and to tell you how we will structure the event today. We will hear brief comments from Jean to know why we're gathered here today and what's the intention behind this event. Besides disseminating this incredible book that Gary Lamb has published, we will hear a presentation by Gary Lam of about 30 minutes, then some comments of Joan regarding the content, and then we will open up a space for questions that all participants may have. For the questions, we will ask you to please write them in the chat box, and I will read 3 or 4 of them according to the time we have left. The expectation is to have an event of about 1 hour. How, Joan? Hi, Joan. How are you? Hello. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to greet you all. And I was looking forward to this event and what we are starting with today. I don't know if I can start, Juan, telling a little bit about the story. Yes, and the intention of the study group. A few months ago, Martin Alonso, we had met already because in the publishing house we had published a different book regarding money, and he asked me to review it and to write a prologue. He said, I have another interesting book. He asked me to do the same, a review, not of the translation, but a philologic translation, because English gives me a lot of work, but regarding the vision of the economy, to do that review and to write a prologue. And when I read the book, I was very pleasantly impressed. I realized the enormous effort behind this book. For those of us who have many years with anthroposophy and trying to deepen in social aspects, threefold society, and the economy, we realize that this is probably one of the least known of the topics that Steiner talked about. In my multiple trips through Latin America or Europe, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, I realized, especially in Waldorf schools, where I am more actively participating, but also in other initiatives, the problem of money and economy is always that people think that they don't have no money, and when they have money, problems will be over. For those of us who have more years into this, well, we realize that this is an error of concept and that it is quintessential to start understanding a little bit more about economy. But economy as something that is alive, which is explained in the book, in the prologue, in the contents of the book. And maybe that's why it is so hard for people to understand the economy. We in the Foundation Money and Awareness, we have a course to deepen on Rudolf Steiner's economy course. I told one of our colleagues who is probably connected today, I don't see him because we are almost 300, Juan Ignacio Cristi is his name, this study group that we're creating, well, if this brings about more people who want to deepen in the foundation, we will continue giving courses to learn more about this because we do need to change our vision of the world socially and economically. And even people who have been working with anthroposophy for years, in far as their ideas, they have probably good ideals, noble feelings connected to anthroposophy, but their behavior connecting to money and the economy is a bit contradictory. Individuals, institutions that are in the field of anthroposophy, I will give no names. I don't want to make comments here that may seem criticisms, but they do require of a deeper analysis. When I read the book and got enthused, especially I have a deep admiration and gratification and thankfulness to Gary Lamb and other people who contributed to this book because this has been enormous. They have read Rudolf Steiner's whole works, and one of his advantages is that he doesn't give you a compilation with all the notes. He scattered his ideas throughout his works. So we thank you because we could research on our own. That man could have given his ideas a bit in a bit more tidy way. Sometimes everything is too scattered, but Gary Lamb has done a formidable job to look for the essential that Steiner said, in which books that is, and he presents extensive literature if you want to deepen into this knowledge. And the topics have been ordered in such a way that allow you to enter slowly and to go into depth whenever you want. So I thought, why not create a study group? And to begin with, I want to say that we're proposing to create a study group. That is not going to be a seminar, a workshop where we will give lectures. No, the idea is that everyone studies at home. But also, our idea was to have different work groups, local work groups or study groups in a school, maybe parents and teachers in different places. Where, for instance, today we have the first session with Gary Lamb presenting the book. In 2 weeks, we will have the next one with the first lecture or the first lesson. It would be good for people to study at home during the first week so that next Wednesday a group of people gets together to comment what they have studied so that they can go in depth before our first meeting. So when we have our first meeting, people come with doubts, what they have not understood fully, what is essential. So the idea is to create a network, let's say, of awareness. And it's very beautiful because regardless the countries, there's something intangible there, but a group of people in different countries working together, working on awareness about social topics, threefold social organization and money, well, this will bring about changes in the world. If we truly believe what we are studying with anthroposophy, that at a spiritual level everything is connected, well, this work, if we do this with awareness, with enthusiasm, with love, with interest, not only for us, this will be disseminated through the world and this will have its effect. So let's propose this. Let's see how people react. Let's see if people are interested. Let's do a presentation. Well, the first response has been amazing. I don't have the exact figure, but Juan told me that we had more than 800 people enrolled. We also know, we veterans, we know that enthusiasm when we launch an enrollment is not the same when we go regular, right? Everybody has things to do. But we have almost 300 people here, 281 people connected now, which I think wonderful if we can maintain this level of participation. The idea is then to go into depth into all of these topics and to see one of the most important topics. Steiner said, we understand the social topic and we resolve the social topic or nothing will be enough. Not even pedagogy, the Waldorf pedagogy, even the Waldorf schools, I'm speaking in general, please don't be offended. I'm not talking about your school, I'm talking in general. The pedagogy of Waldorf schools, when you touch upon the social and economic subjects, they run into contradictions because they are not trained enough as teachers. And this is not a criticism, this is a call to do something to improve this all. And even more so, facing events that are coming. But there's a next talk. It's not the time to talk about this today. There will be another talk. Not much time would have gone in the third millennium, and things will happen that will require us to really have understood social and economic topics. I will talk about this on another day, it's not for today. All this just to say that we proposed these study groups if people get encouraged. Well, a lot of people got encouraged. Let's do individual work at home. Next week, try to create groups, 2, 3, 10, 15 people, the number is not as important as the courage and the will to sustain it. And a fortnight later, we will give you the exact dates, we will let you know, to have a gathering to share what we have learned. We will act as moderators. It's very interesting for me to say that this is not a seminar that I would give. I give other kinds of seminars. The proposal here is that everyone works at home and in groups to bring doubts. I have not understood this. I read this. I didn't understand it. Well, let's share doubts. This is the purpose of the soul. And it's important that we can do this and then take it to the places where we are in our jobs, in our schools, in our companies, having the courage to implement all this. This has been the intention. I hope we can continue with this. This is not my turn to speak today. We will give the floor soon to Gary Lam, who will introduce the book. We have 11 chapters, so probably we'll have today's session and 11 more. I hope we have encouraged you so that you continue learning in depth and in other spheres and other levels. I will close my speech now and I will give the floor to Gary Lam, who is the main speaker today. Thank you, Joan. You have now the information visible on screen. We will start in 2 weeks. This will be a meeting per chapter. And I also wrote in the chat box. I'm sorry, Joan. I don't know, but I only see a white screen. That's all I can see. Just 1 second. Okay, now I can see. Let me check. Let me try this. Is it loading now? Okay, can you see it now? Okay. Well, I'm sorry about the technical glitch. You have all the information here for the study group that will start in 2 weeks, as Joan said. So everyone's welcome. We will send all of this information per email after this session. If you don't follow exactly how you can join, you will understand later on. And I would like now to move to Gary's presentation. Well, welcome, Gary. Welcome to this session to share with us some aspects that you consider essential for a first approach to the work behind this book. So I thank you beforehand for your willingness to be here with us today. Floor is yours.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay. Yes, wonderful. Well, I thank you all for the opportunity to share many years' work on this book in particular. And I'm going to only bring 3 ideas or focus on 3 aspects of it. These aspects are not typically a part of traditional economic theory. But before I get into that, I want to put us in the context of where we are at in human evolution. Rudolf Steiner describes this as the age of the consciousness soul. And it's an age where individualism will get stronger and stronger and stronger. And with this individualism will be coming ever greater antisocial forces in each one of us. And so one of our main tasks as social beings is to work on and transform and transcend these antisocial forces. And I want to read a brief passage on this. And I have to get another pair of glasses so I can read it. And it's actually from the preface to Rudolf Steiner's main book on social threefolding, in English is called Toward Social Renewal. And it goes like this, and this is from the preface. In modern times, human society has entered a phase in which social structures continually give rise to antisocial forces. This has to be overcome again and again. Just as there is no food that permanently satisfies our hunger, neither is there any universal remedy for our social ills. But people can form communities together in which the living interactions of individuals can repeatedly steer their existence in a social direction. So, to develop socially informed, socially responsible organizations, Waldorf schools, farms, whatever, it's an ongoing process. And I will now just give you a little background. First of all, um, how this how this compendium came together. Um, and Sarah Hearn and I, Sarah Mecca now, went through all of Steiner's books, lectures, and essays that from 1917 to 1922. He culminated in what's called the World Economy Lectures in 1922. But he did go to England and give a couple more lectures on the threefold social organism in 1922 also. But one has to go back to around 1904, 1905, 1906, when Rudolf Steiner was still connected with the Theosophical Society, and he introduced in the esoteric lessons what he called the fundamental social law. First to the esoteric school. Later, he wrote a three-part essay called in English Anthroposophy and the Social Question. And so I will speak a bit about this fundamental social law in a moment. But first, I want to look at Steiner's ideas on a threefold social organism, and then look at the fundamental social law, and then look at his concepts of economic associations. So we're going to start with broad structural pictures, and then inner development, and then social relations. So outward arrangements, inner development, and interconnection, interpersonal relations with other people. So there's three aspects in any endeavor, I would say, in creating an anthroposophically based initiative. Let's go to the next slide on threefolding, please. Yep. All right. So yeah, so this is one of the techniques I have developed, which I think works fairly well, is to work with comparisons and contrasts. So rather than just talking about theory about Steiner's social ideas, social threefolding or the threefold organism, to look at, well, what are different existing forms and compare and contrast them. And I actually developed this technique teaching high school economics in a Waldorf school here at Hawthorne Valley. And one of Steiner's suggestions or indications of how to work with high school students is to work by giving comparisons and contrasting, and allow the students to work out how they relate to these differing things and come to their own opinions, but in an objective way. And so we're not meant as high school teachers to tell them this is the way the world should be. We'll tell them this is the way the world is and give them as much insight. So I'm only going to, on the top row, I'm only going to mention private capitalism and socialism now. Fundamentalism, in a way, is actually intersperses the other two. So, yeah, so private capitalism, which is the dominant form of economic activity in the world, in which um, the economy, as it's depicted here under private capitalism, the economy is pretty much the dominating sector in social life. And when you see economy, state, and culture, this is not, those sectors are not, it's not specific to Rudolf Steiner. Virtually all, I would say, beginning college level courses looking at social organization, social development, recognize and those three sectors. So that's not anything new. But what's new is how they should relate to each other, according to Rudolf Steiner, and also what should be the inner dynamics of those three realms. So, under private capitalism in general, we have a situation where the economy dominates the other two spheres, beginning with the government or the state or the political realm. And what so it's, even during Steiner's time, this was the case. He said that politicians were mere puppets of the of big moneyed people in the economy. So what happens is when the economy dominates the state and influences who's elected, what laws should be passed, they because we often have state-run education, the education system, state education system, is usually to a large degree a reflection of economic interests. And so, whereas in Waldorf education, you're trying to educate each child to enable them to find their own destiny and way of working into the world, with when you have this domination of economy, state over culture, including education, then it's almost um, assumed that the most important thing to learn about is economic priorities. Now, in opposition, or in that private capitalism, socialism has arisen. Um, the main sector is usually the state, and the state determines much of the economy, the economic production. Russia had these 5-year plans for agriculture, determining what should be produced, how much. And so the intelligence comes out of the state as far as the economy is concerned. Now, I'm going to jump down to the threefold social organism. And Steiner was pretty adamant with the idea that no one of the spheres should dominate the other. Each one of those, the sectors, the economy, the state and government, cultural life, including education, have something vitally important to contribute to society. And if one of the, let's say, as the economy dominates state, it's a reflection of economic interest, and then culture and education are a reflection of those two other spheres. And then that cripples our cultural life. It doesn't allow the free development that should pass through every rising generation. The new insights we're looking for is what each generation brings. And if our educational system presumes that the priority is economic life, we're cutting off what I'd say the task that the children incarnating have taken up, what they want to do, and what their generation wants to bring about. Now, so each one of those sectors are equally important, and each one has its own unique purpose and jurisdiction and administration. So education, the state shouldn't be the administrator of culture. and education. Education should have its own administration. So this way of working allows each one of those sectors to fulfill, I would say, its higher purpose. And that can only happen if in our cultural life, in our education system, that every child is able to develop to its full capacities. And cultural life is the renewing element, both in the economy and the state. And let's go on to the next slide. Yeah. So the fundamental social law, as I said, Rudolf Steiner brought this first of all into the esoteric school, the highest or the deepest level of spiritual teaching out of theosophy at that time, and he brings that in that circle. And it's later that he uh, brings it into an essay and also starts giving public lectures on it. And it's really heart I would say, painful that in the end, last part of his essay on the fundamental social law, which he published in a magazine that he edited, that he said that he would continue in the next issue with this, working on this, and he never wrote about it again until it um, until it appeared the within the context of threefolding. And this is, I would say, a way of working that Steiner uh, did, is that he tried to bring new ideas. If people were not interested in it, he didn't try to push it. He moved on. And so but when he came to the threefolding, there was this in renewed interest. So he could reintroduce it in his economic realm. So the fundamental social law, as it says on the right there, is an ancient spiritual tenet. This law, this principle is thousands of years old. It was known in the great mystery centers, centuries ago, and now it's meant to be consciously taken up in our economic realm. And I will read what's here, and this is a paraphrasing of several um, translations that Rudolf Steiner gave. The prosperity and well-being of a community or society will be the greater the more the economic production and services are performed for others, based on interest and care for other people. Um, Altruism, and I'll come back to that in a moment. In contrast, the more that work is based on self-interest and egotism, the more that poverty, want, and suffering will occur somewhere at some point in time on the earth. So what we have here is actually the opposite of private capitalism and the concept of the free market, where it's posited that the more you work out of self-interest, the more productive people will be and the greater amount of wealth will be in society. So this is the complete opposite of that, uh, I'd say, underpinning of our typical market economy at this point. Um, now, at the, I have a little note at the bottom, requirements, inner development and associative structures. So what do we do with this ancient spiritual tenet? That it requires interest in other people. And Rudolf Steiner went so far as to say is that achieving greater and greater interest in other people is the foundation of all social life. This is a capacity that we have to continually work on, developing greater and greater interest in other people. And on the other hand, the worst trait is apathy or indifference. And Steiner actually said that apathy or indifference is the highest form of evil. So in a way, you could say living by the spiritual tenet is a way to counter, I would say, the dark forces and bring into prosperity and health and wealth to the greatest number of people. The question is, how do you do that? Now, I'll just flip over, look at the picture a moment. So you have people connected to producing food, clothing, and shelter. And in general, I'm of the opinion that if we want to work with Steiner's threefold ideas and economic ideas and adhere to the fundamental social law, probably the best places to start is food, clothing, and shelter in those economic realms. And so you have at the top, you have a baker making food, and you have a little lunch box and a loaf of bread behind the mason, the brick builder who's building housing structure, work environments, and then someone who's making clothes, and then you see in each other realm something that each of those people are creating. So it's just a very simple picture or image of society working together in food, clothing, and shelter. So let's go on to the next one. Economic associations. Now, before I just listen to me, don't look at the words yet. So let's think about how decisions are made in the typical market economy, the so-called free market. And one is, as I had mentioned, the best motivation in a free market is self-interest. And where is the intelligence in a free market? How are decisions made as far as what to produce, how much to produce, what are the prices? Who makes those decisions? And in theory, from market economy, it actually is the forces of supply and demand in the market economy, unrestricted forces of supply and demand, which will result in the best prices and the fastest way to get products to people. So it's left, this intelligence is actually the intelligence of an unregulated market. Whereas Rudolf Steiner says actually the decisions about what to produce, how much, the prices, and everything needs to be consciously done by people representing all the sectors within the economy. So now I'll read the right hand column: producer, distributor, consumer associations. The market relationship must be superseded by associations that regulate the exchange and productions of goods. There must be representatives from each of the subsectors in the economy: production, consumption, and distribution, that come together. And those associations representing the three main aspects of the economy come together to discuss prices, how much to produce, quality standards, all that kind of thing. So it's a collaborative, associative, conscious engagement. It's not left to the whims of the market or the opposite, companies that have monopolies over a section of industry. So it's actually individual engagement, conscious sharing of ideas. And so this is really the main organ to try to build up if we want to transform economic life. This idea of bringing together representatives of the different aspects of the economy. Of course, there are many other um, subsets between the producer and distributor and consumer, processors and everything, but that's the main expanse of it. Now, the question is, how do those decisions get made? So let's go over to the picture. Very simple picture. So lower left, you have looks like apples, harvesting apples. So you have production, um, agricultural production. And then in the top image, we have a marketplace where the products from the economy are dis, uh, sold and consumers come to purchase them. And then we have the family together eating the products that they might have gotten from the distribution, the farm stand, which in turn got it from a farmer. Now, what's the connect? So then we have this little table in the middle with three different people. And this is really the heart and soul of the whole economy. It's, let's say, the person on the right is a representative of the consumers, the people who consume the food. Um, the person up top center is a representative of the distribution system. And the person on the left is a representative of the production, and in this case, farming and agriculture. So what you have are the situation. So those representatives um, come together of each of those different three realms, and they talk over. Let's just say it's a local regional thing, and you're discussing vegetables, right? So the farmer at the table, and it could be not just one farmer or not just one distributor and not just one, it could be a collection of people would say, okay, like probably start with the consumer, like the consumer would say, okay, this is the kind of vegetables we want this year. This is how much, these are the quality standards. Um, and so a discussion begins. And let's say the producer and the farmer on the left side says, well, okay, that sounds good, but the price that you want to pay isn't going to cover my cost. If you want that quantity, that quality at these times. Um, and so then there's the distributor in the middle trying to help negotiate these things. So what it is that there's a conscious conversation of how to attain the pricing, what to produce, and how to produce. And this is a very simple form, but it can be drawn out into a much larger aspect in all sectors. Um, so producer, consumer, distributor. And a couple examples, I think the what we call up here the community supported agriculture movement, or CSA, I would say, is a beginning of this associative principle in the agricultural realm. Also, I think I would consider the fair trade movement also working in this way. I used to teach, as I mentioned, teach high school economics, and I would take the class on trips. And one of the places that I took them was to the Boston area, to this organization called Equal Exchange. And Equal Exchange is mainly was at that time mainly a processor and distributor of coffee. And the organizers of that Equal Exchange originally were managers of food co-ops. And they, at a certain point, they felt a bit guilty of what they were doing in the food co-op because they were mainly concerned, it was a consumer co-op, so they were mainly concerned what consumers wanted and needed and what prices they wanted to pay. And they felt, well, we really have to, if we want to have a social economy, we have to expand our consciousness just beyond ourselves as consumers. So they started Equal Exchange, and they thought, well, what's one product a lot of people in the United States want? And that's coffee. All right. So what they set up was a fair trade system where they worked with cooperatives down in Central and South America and determined, okay, and ask them what kind of income do you need for what you're doing? So they're, so they got their perspective. And then they went back to their company up in Boston and went to co-op and said, well, how much you're willing to pay? The farmers down in South America, Central America say this is what they need. And then another thing is they became a distributor. Um, and so they were a distribution system. So they consciously worked, bringing conscious conversations between those three sectors. Um, and one of the things they did, for instance, is that they paid for some of the farmers down in Central America to come up to the United States and go around to the cooperatives, food cooperatives, and share their stories. And then also consumers going down Central America and seeing some of their co-ops. I've lost my picture. Has anybody else lost it? Yeah, please. I'm almost done. Okay. All right, anyway, so that was an example that I was able to, take my high school students and show them this company that was really concerned about all three aspects: the producers, the distributors, and the consumers. So there is this, I would say, a very good aspect that one can show young people. Um, Now, okay, so in the on the right where the text is, um, the market relationship of the common economic economy must be superseded by associations that regulate the exchange and production of goods. No longer the free market and supply and demand, and on the one hand, and then monopolies determining all of that. There must be representation from those three sectors, collaboration, decisions, and one other aspect, then just adding on at the end here, is that in all of this, land, labor, and capital should no longer be treated as commodities. That's kind of an underlying element in all these economic associations. We have to decommodify land. Land should not be bought and sold, for a profit. Labor shouldn't be treated as a commodity, and capital, money, shouldn't be treated as a commodity being bought and sold. So that's another aspect in addition to this associative economics. So that's just a hint of the direction that Rudolf Steiner went in his economic treatises, lectures. And so maybe I'll just end there and just see what kind of questions arise.
To continue, what we will do now is to give Joan the possibility to make maybe two brief remarks about the contents, because I know it's also part of his life and his work. And while Joan expresses his comments to contribute to what Gary presented, you will have the chance to write some questions in the chat box that might have come to your minds while Gary was speaking. The questions regarding the study group, links to buy the book, leave them towards the end. I will share the links again, or you will receive them by mail also. We will be receiving questions referring to what Gary just presented. So, Joan, a few minutes with you. Yes, just as a brief summary, because the important ideas that Gary has conveyed are very clear. First, when he talked about the fundamental social law, it's important to know that this concept or this principle existed in the old centers of mystery, maybe formulated in a different way. So, in a way, we're saying that what was done in mystery centers that were hidden, the initiation that we had in temples, well, maybe we could say that our new temples are our companies, our initiatives, where the initiation is done through a social meeting with us and with the land, with Mother Earth. We have to take all of this as something sacred. This is one aspect, and something else that is very important when I travel and I go to Waldorf schools and they invite me to participate. Could you help us apply threefold social organism? And they think this is a method that you can apply. This is not so. It's a way to understand how a healthy life of the social organism would be, and it's something essential. Yes, we have to create economic structures, associative structure that are adequate, but at the same time, it is equally important to begin with to undertake an inner development work. If we do not develop ourselves innerly, it is impossible. Despite how many structures we create, it will never work. And this is very interesting because in the book he speaks about this in the first chapter. There are many interesting exercises. The books gives you room to work really a lot. And we could also understand this as an encounter with our very own contradictions. On where, if you want, when we talk about money, it's also seeing our own double, let's say, or our guardian, as Steiner explains in How to Acquire Knowledge About Superior Worlds in the chapter before last, this horrific image that they can present themselves saying, well, I am you, but you haven't transformed yourself yet. A part of the image of the guardian, we find it when we work with money. We have all our fears, contradictions, ambition. That's why, in itself, this is a work of getting to know yourself. It's an inner development work that has to be aligned with the development of associative structures. And the second point here regarding associative structures is that it is also crucial. Well, if we could apply a formula, right? If social threefolding would be a form that is no fundamentalism, no capitalism, if we had a formula, if it were a formula, it would attack our personal freedoms directly. It's a contradiction. It cannot be a formula. It has to be a human encounter. This is the task for this era. We have to be aware of ourselves, of others. Each decision we make, each economic decision, well, it doesn't matter if it has to do with buying, loaning, donating, buying. We have to be aware not only on how it affects me, but on how it'll affect others, how it'll affect the planet. Also, well, it was not talked about. He has not talked about this so much, but it was in the slide, and it's something crucial, and it will be hard to understand it. We have to see how we can correct this grave historical error when he talks about land capital and workforce. Well, we cannot treat ourselves as a good, as a product. And today we buy and sell work, we buy and sell land. This is one of the biggest errors that causes more pain in social and economic life. So creating these structures, these economic associative structures that can work at least for now independently from states and governments, we can still establish among us free relationships. The market, well, sometimes the market has laws, but the market does not force you to buy the cheapest possible and to sell the most expensive possible. This is not a law by the market. This is a behavior. We can choose a different behavior, a path to truth, where we have this image. We sit around a table to have a dialogue. What do you need? What do I need? How do we go about it? And it's neither liberalism, everyone it's free will, do whatever you want, which leads us to a super productive world that destroys everything that makes no sense, or a totally directed economy as socialism that is asphyxiating, doesn't let you move. This leaves everything in our hands, and it's wonderful, but this requires a lot of inner work. So these are some of the essential points that he has presented. The book goes really in depth with all of this. But as I said in the beginning, it's important to work on this individually, to create groups for discussion, for study, for dialogue. I hope there will be a lot of people like today. We are almost 300. If we can sustain this and then implement this, well, I'm very thankful to you, Gary, for this presentation that you gave in not so many words. You synthesized the essential things of the book. We have to create an economy adequate to the era of the soul, of a conscious soul. We saw that the past models do not work, but we're grabbing them, we're stuck with them, and we are transferring them to our children because we're afraid of change. I repeat this again, the wonders of Waldorf education and pedagogy. Well, in our behavior, through our behavior, people, students have to learn to get educated in new social content that does not come from theory but from our behavior. Having said all this, and to stick to this idea of not extending ourselves too much, we could open the space for questions and comments for everyone who wants to participate. Oh, and I wanted to say this. Please buy the book. There are some sites in Spain. Please do not make photocopies of the book and share it because I will cut your heads off symbolically, right? Because we're talking about associative economy that makes sense, and people will say, let's make photocopies. Well, they don't do anything. You have not understood anything. So don't think about it. If you think about it, don't even say it because I have the permit to cut your heads, symbolically, of course, in case you think about this. There are many places where you can buy these. They will be distributed in your countries. You can underline it, take notes. When it's you've underlined it too much, buy another one because it's really worth it. Thank you, Joan, for your words. We have a few questions in the chat box. We are done with the hour since we started, so we will aim at rather short answers so that we can answer 3 questions, let's say. Well, let's start with the first one by Agustin Jimenez, who is asking if you could go or if you could expand the idea about decommoditizing land, labor, and capital. Could you please add a few words on this? And before your reply, Gary, I will also profit from this moment to tell you that I place all of the links to buy the book again in the checks, whether you are in Argentina, in the US, if you want it for a Kindle, if you're in another country, Latin America, if you're in Brazil, if you're in Europe, you have all the links there. Just refer to the chat. You can find all the links there. Now, Gary.
Yes. Well, decommodifying land. Um, there is what's called the Community Land Trust movement in the United States, and it was started in part, by Bob Swan, decades ago. He was studied Rudolf Steiner's world economy lectures, and he and an African American fellow in the South decided to create a community land trust, pull it out of circulation, and have let's say, a local board of trustees to oversee the use. And it was meant to provide affordable land for Black people in the South of the United States to be able to take up farming. And so that little project, I would say little in size, but huge in the world, has expanded to thousands of land trusts all over the United States. So that is a significant movement. So that's something there. And remind me of the other aspects, if I have time, of the question. Labor. Well, one of Steiner's indications is that you shouldn't pay people for their work in the sense that paid labor. And one idea he suggests is that, and this was taken up at the Waldorf School here, is let's say you have a Waldorf School teacher coming to teach in September, new school year. You don't pay them at the end of September. You pay them before September. You pay them advance to free them up to be able to do their work. So that's a concept. Like, how do you liberate? That's the idea. How do you liberate, free someone up to do what they want to do in service to society? So this, I would say, it's a pay forward concept applied to wages or labor. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, next.
There are two people with the same question, and according to the reactions, there's many more people with the same question. And this question is if you could give us additional examples of a successful dialogue scheme between producers, distributors, market, consumers that has had this economic ideal.
Um, I cannot. um, and why did I say that? I would say what's happened is when you brought these dialogues together. Well, I gave the community supported agriculture, fair trade. Those are the two examples that I know of that really haven't fulfilled their destiny, I would say, in relation to this ideal um, of, and, but I feel that it could happen. I think a new impulse could come into the community supported agriculture in movement, particularly from the consumer side. Um, and th- I'll give you a picture. I hope you can comprehend it in a short time. I picture associations, there's vertical associations and horizontal associations. Horizontal associations would be producer, distributor, consumer, cross section. A vertical association would be, let's say, farmers associating together in their own sector, right? So you have vertical farmers together, and then maybe consumers. And I feel the weak point is actually from the consumer side. I think we as customers, consumers, as individuals need to take up this impulse and start conversing about, let's say, if you're with a community supported farm. I wrote an article 20 years ago, I think, is how could it was how can the community supported agriculture movement be the basis for an associative economy? And I gave the example in Hudson Valley, there were dozens and dozens of community supported agriculture projects. And but the consumers focused on their own farm, but the consumers uh, together didn't get together and try have a bigger picture. And so I think this vertical association needs to come into play a bit so that bigger aspects can be taken in consideration. For instance, when I wrote that, 90% community supported agriculture supplied maybe 10% of the food in the Hudson Valley in upstate New York. I'm saying, whoa, what about the other 90%? Why can't we extend this idea to beyond the local farmer? What about the food down from Florida or Central America? So how and expand this idea so that more and more food can be gathered together and, produced and purchased and eaten that's done out of this conscious relation. So I feel my own in this area, I feel the weak link is actually uh, the eaters of food, the consumers of food. Somehow that has to go beyond a single farm. It really has to expand beyond that. Uh, and I can make that essay. It's somewhat dated, but the principle is inherent in there. I can make that available, and you wouldn't. You could photocopy all you want. Yeah, yeah. Okay, can you repeat that question again? I am, yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I've been approached by that, and some young fellows who are much more savvy in technology and artificial intelligence than I am. And I I think it's I haven't I've invited people to give me an idea of how to do it. I am not very savvy in the technology world, so that creative idea is not going to come out of me, but I could help analyze it. And I haven't had anyone introduce what I consider a viable aspect. The other thing is, and this is a bit of a pun, I think you have to work from the ground up. Somehow introduce, let's say, actually work with food, clothing, and shelter, and then you can add technologies for communications and build out from that rather than trying to take an idea into a non-physical world and try to make these relations. I and I'm older generation, so I can imagine building up something from with real products, uh, people meeting to each other and then building out like technology that can support it. But to have start outside, um, I'm not I'm not knowledgeable enough to create it. And in addition, I haven't heard any plausible proposal in that direction. But I would consider listening to it.
I'm sorry, we are reaching the time to close this session. I would like, before closing, to ask Joan if you wanted to make any additional comments before we close. Well, very briefly, I think we have said everything we needed to say. We had to abide by the time allotted for today's sessions. If I understood, it will be recorded. We will send to everyone who registered to encourage others to be part of this. I think it's a great thing to disseminate and to encourage you to meet in a fortnight with the work with the first lesson. What we have talked about social forces, anti-social forces, which are contradictory, how to handle this. I'm very encouraged to meet you in 2 weeks and to help spread the word about all this because we have to work for sustainable change. Thank you, Gary Lamb, and thank you everyone who connected today. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Gary, Martin Alonso, Alex, our translator who has been interpreting the whole time. Thank you, as Joan said, and as I said before, if you are missing a link or if you have any questions, you will receive all the information by email. If you have not registered, send me an email to juanfbotero@gmail.com. I will send you the email as well, and we will share more information about the study group. And for whoever is connected to a company or organization that wants to connect and associate with other organizations that are sharing their experiences in this path to a Steinerian economy, as Gary said, you're also welcome to write to me and to join this network of the World Getianum Association. That is all for today. Thank you for being present today and sharing. I will let you open your mix so you can say goodbye to Gary and Joan. If I can manage that, let me see if I can find that button. That's it. We are ready. You can open your microphone.